So in regards to the students who are here, what is some advice that you would give them for entering into this industry and being successful?
I would say don't think that you can get a job in the industry right away, because it's sometimes pretty hard. If you send out a resume, because I get a lot of resumes, and I can tell you if you get a resume from somebody who's right straight out of school, it's going to be difficult because most people are looking for experience, and translation and interpretation, the really good skills come with experience. So my advice would be to go into a profession where you're exposed to that kind of experience. Let's say you could start as a project manager in a translation company, or you could work at a company where in an international company, where your skills would be needed, your language skills would be needed, and get into it like that. But you're not going to become an independent translator and interpreter overnight once you get out of school. It's not going to happen that way, and it doesn't make that much money to begin with. So, you have to build your career. It's a building of a career, I think. So that's from a professional side, from a translation agency side. That's what I could say.
Unless you, depending on what your language pairs are, I am still in a unique situation because I did end up living abroad where English was a very high demand language. The opposite is not true for me being back in Denver. French is not a high demand language here. So I think it's important to think about where your personal skills are going to be spotlighted the most. I did end up in a company, a cosmetics firm, in their international marketing department. I certainly did not set out. Had anyone asked me in college, what will you be doing in the next 5 years? Never, ever, ever would I have said anything remotely close to that. So I think it's important at this phase to kind of think about, could I move abroad after I graduate? Even if you want to pursue a master's degree, maybe take a year off and see. I don't know how feasible it is to think about volunteer work with Doctors Without Borders or all kinds of organizations like that who do need translators, they do need interpreters. Unfortunately, a lot of times it can be a volunteer position, but if you have that flexibility to gain the experience, I think that's something that at least I would consider today if I were where you are.
Yeah, I would second that. I think it's really important to have lived in the country of your non-dominant language. So if your dominant language is English and you want to be translating Ukrainian, it would be really useful to have lived in the Ukraine and to understand the culture and the way people interact with each other. What's the slang? What's the favored term for, I don't know, pull something out of your hat. Because when you start translating or interpreting, you need to be able to come up with these terms automatically or know what people use in the country where you're either the person you're speaking to, or if your document is targeted somewhere. Often for Spanish, you can get a document. We're sending this to Spain. This is Spanish for the United States. We want this to be for Mexico. And so it's nice to know what are those regional terms, what slang gets used. And if you're a community interpreter, it's nice to know what the local language is as opposed to what people might use in country, because it could be different in the case of Spanish. There are terms that are used in the U.S. that don't necessarily get used outside.
And I mean, that ties into all sorts of other things too in translation, I think, in issues. The fact that you really, most of the time, translate into your native language, because that's what people are looking for, because that's the language where you have your knowledge. That's where you're the most sure. And you can tell that I'm not an English speaker. So, but it's really important to know that, but you need to know your source languages very well too. You need to know that culture. You need to know exactly what is meant when you translate. Otherwise, you make mistakes, which, it's not just about words. It's about the context. And that again ties into tools that we use, or machine translation, which is also something that we might want to ask about. But the cultural context is really, really